No talking. Seriously. Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. So, to be a pro at cultivating mushrooms, you basically have to master two parameters. And those two parameters are fresh air exchange slash CO2 mitigation and humidity. And that can be a really delicate balance sometimes, and it can be really difficult to master, especially for new mushroom cultivators. So, keeping those two in harmony is the difference between you becoming a mycelium hero or zero. And we want you guys to be mycelium heroes. Each mushroom species has its own tolerance to these parameters, and some are more sensitive to certain parameters than others. But today we're going to talk specifically about oyster mushrooms because odds are, if you're a new mushroom cultivator, you're going to start with oyster mushrooms. When I get time in the evenings, I'm always cruising the Facebook groups, mushroom growing Facebook groups, and I see a ton of people on there, and they're just getting started growing mushrooms. They haven't built a cool automated humidity chamber yet or anything. They might have just picked up a tabletop farm or one of these mushroom growing kits, and they're trying to fruit their first mushrooms. And some of them do okay. I see some people making a ton of mistakes that are easily correctable. So that's what I'm going to help you with in this video. Oyster mushrooms are a good choice to start off with for new mushroom growers. I think that's why a lot of people recommend them. And the reason is they're so friggin' aggressive that even if you totally screw it up, you're probably still going to get a mushroom or two and not have complete abject failure. But they're also kind of prima donnas when it comes to the two parameters I started the video with, the fresh air exchange and the humidity. They need a lot of both. And as I mentioned, that's a delicate balance. So you have to realize that your mushroom blocks are actually producing CO2. Just like animals, mycelium produces CO2 as it digests your substrate. And CO2 is a lot heavier than air. So what it does is it'll fall and it'll pool in whatever you're growing your mushrooms in, whether that be a humidity chamber or shotgun tub, plastic tote. It's going to pool there. So we need a way to mitigate that if you're growing a species that is not very tolerant to high CO2, which oysters definitely are not. Oysters, if you grow them in high CO2 conditions, they grow these really long, thin, spindly, coral-like fruits that nobody wants because you get basically all stem and no cap. And oysters, most strains, the stems are really tough and stringy, and we don't want to eat those. We want those nice, big, fan-shaped caps. So we need a way to mitigate that CO2. Now, with some other species, you can actually use CO2 buildup to your advantage. Like, I'll show you these reishi here. So I've been growing these two reishi blocks for the last 4 months or so. This is red reishi, Ganoderma lucidum, and I've been intentionally growing these in a stifling environment, basically a sealed tub, to make them produce these long, spindly fruits like this. And some of these are about 12 to 13 inches long now. I'm just going to let them keep growing and see how far they'll go. Another mushroom that a lot of people grow intentionally in high CO2 conditions is enoki, or Flammulina volutipes. Real popular in Southeast Asian cooking. Really long stems, great flavor. But oysters, you don't want to go there. You're just going to get stringy, inedible stems and no caps. So our oysters, we want to provide some fresh air exchange and get them to cap out. It doesn't have to be super complicated, and that's what I'm going to teach you in this video. I'm going to teach you at the very basic, simplest level how to mitigate CO2 buildup, give them plenty of humidity, plenty of fresh air exchange, and still get perfect oyster mushrooms with nothing more than a plastic tub and a spray mister with some distilled water in it. All right, if you guys have watched my other videos, you've seen me working with these 105 quart Sterilite totes before. They're super useful for growing mushrooms. They have all kinds of cool uses. I'm going to show you a couple of them today. I just picked these up at Walmart. Fairly inexpensive, pretty readily available. You can get them at the big box stores and stuff too. But clear is good because you can see what's going on in there. And also it lets the light in because our mushrooms do need light, especially these oyster mushrooms we're growing now. So I have 2 oyster blocks going, 2 different setups with the containers here. What I do is you can use anything from 1.5 to a 2-inch hole saw and drill some holes in the ends of these things. And then I just have those stuffed with balls of polyfill. And that just gives you another way to regulate airflow in and out of these totes. We're in the middle of winter, and you can see we're at around 45% humidity, which is really low. So let's start over here because this would be stage 1. So when you first get your kit or you have your block and it's all whited up, you're ready to induce pinning, which means you're ready to grow mushrooms. Usually you're cutting a slit in the bag, which I did here. I just cut a big X slit in one end of the bag. And I just have this in my tote. We're not giving it a ton of fresh air exchange at this point. We have all of our polyfill balls in. Some of my totes have one in the end. The other ones have 2 in the end. Really doesn't make a difference. These are just a couple different generations of builds here. When you're first trying to get the pins to develop on your block, you don't need a ton of fresh air exchange at that stage. What you do need is a ton of humidity. So I've just had these blocks in here with the lid on, polyfill balls in place, and really just once a day I've been taking the lid off. And when I take the lid off, I'll use the lid and kind of fan some fresh air in here, and I'll mist the inside of the tote. So I'm misting the underneath side of the lid, the inside of the tote, and then I just pop the lid back on, and I just have a little spray bottle over here with distilled water in it. That's what I'm using. And so I'm misting the inside of the tote. I put the lid back on, and that's it. It's just going to maintain humidity at near saturation in there, and it's going to get those pins to develop for you nicely. So let me move this lid out of the way here. You can see this is a blue oyster strain. You can see those pins are looking really moist. I haven't been spraying them directly because just the humidity that's being maintained in this tub is plenty to get them to develop. But once they start to extend away from the substrate by 1 inch or 2, like you see here, you got to switch things up because oysters really demand a lot of fresh air exchange at that point. Once they're ready to develop, I want them to cap out, so you need to give them more fresh air exchange. So I'll move them to a tote like this here. You can see this tote is laying on its side, and I have the lid just propped up against it a little bit, and it's allowing all that CO2 to dump out of the container. So we're getting a way to vent our CO2, but obviously now that we're getting more fresh air exchange, we also have to increase our misting to keep our mushrooms nice and moist. So let me move this lid out of the way. So now, instead of misting once a day, I'm misting several times a day and just leaving that lid ajar a little bit. And that's allowing that CO2 to spill out of the container because our mycelium in there, as it digests the substrate, it's generating CO2. So that needs to have a way to flow out. Okay, so we have it on its side. It's not being trapped in the bottom. It's able to flow out. We're leaving the lid cracked, which is just, a little fresh air from the room. Just the normal air currents in the room is flowing in there. And I'm misting. So a lot of people online, there's a lot of confusion with this as well. They say, don't mist your pins directly. You don't want to directly mist your mushrooms. You just want to mist the container. And that is true in most situations. Anytime you're maintaining constant high humidity, you do not want to mist your pins directly because they'll get too wet, and that'll lead to bacterial infection. You'll get bacterial blotch. Your pins will start to look yellow-brown on you. They'll smell funny, and that's not what we want. But there are times when you can mist your mushrooms directly. If you're trying to grow these just in open air and 45% humidity, these things will soak up almost everything you can give them. You could literally mist these things every 15-30 minutes and they would just suck it up and keep growing. But the key is they need a way to dry off. In open air with a lot of airflow and low humidity, they're going to dry off really quickly. Saying you can never mist your mushrooms directly is like saying, mushrooms can't get rained on in the wild or they won't grow normally. If you've seen these oyster mushrooms grow in the wild, they get some rain on them, they get wet, and they just grow like crazy. But that's because they're in open air and they can wick the moisture off. So keep that in mind. That's an important concept to understand. Because I have them still somewhat surrounded in a humid environment, I'm trying to not miss these directly. You know, when I miss the tote, they get a little on them, not a big deal. But with this setup, typically, like, you know, you leave for work in the morning, you can mist them up good, leave the lid cracked, they'll be fine until you get home. Same thing before you go to bed. So what I'm doing is I just have a spray bottle here with distilled water, and 3-4 times a day I'm just misting up the tote, getting it nice and moist in there. If you get a little mist on your mushrooms, not a big deal. Leave the lid cracked, and you can take the lid and fan a little fresh air in there as well, and just kind of monitor your mushrooms and see how they're growing. So I'm just going to prop the lid back up against it, and we'll let them go and watch how they develop. It's been about a day and a half since I filmed that last clip. About 3-4 times a day I've just been pulling the lid off, fanning some fresh air in, and giving it a mist with our distilled water. Pull the lid off, give you guys a close-up here. I'm really happy with the way everything's looking. Look at this block here. This was our first one to go in. These are photophilic mushrooms, so they're gonna respond and try and grow up towards the light. So you can see our stems came out and now they're turning up nicely, going up towards the lights. And now these caps are really starting to shell out, and I think they're gonna flatten out nice and form that traditional oyster mushroom shape that we're looking for. You can see the caps are nice and dark. There's no signs of yellowing, browning, any cracking or anything. So that indicates that our moisture balance is good, and that I think we're also getting enough fresh air exchange, because these caps are gonna level out for us nicely. Take a look at the other one. This block is a day or two behind that one, and that one's looking really nice as well. Caps are a little lighter in color, which I think this one might have just started to dry out just a little bit overnight, but I did just mist it up. Still no cracking, no yellowing, no browning, and just a day or two behind the other one. But you can see the stems came out. Now they're just starting to turn up here, and they should look like that other black shortly. So I'm just going to keep it up 3-4 times a day, fan fresh air in, give it a mist, and we'll check back in a couple days. It's just been a couple days, believe it or not. That's how fast these oysters grow. And I think this block on the left is actually ready to pick, so we're going to go ahead and pick that one off. The one on the right is a little bit behind, maybe a day or two away. Move our lid. So check that out. Those are some beautiful, beautiful oyster mushrooms, flattened out nicely. This is right where you want to get them, when those cap margins are still incurved just a bit, like an umbrella, before they elevate to plane. Once those cap edges flatten out, that's when they really start dumping spores. So we're going to pick this one off, but you can see no cracking, beautiful color. Everything looks really good. So just in a simple tote here, we got some beautiful mushrooms. These guys over here, they're still expanding out. They'll be there in a day or two. Before I pick these off, I just wanted to show you guys this. You can see those spores already really starting to accumulate on the bottoms of some of those mushrooms. And this is early yet. If you let these go and flatten out another couple days, you would get spores everywhere. So it's definitely time to pick these off. So let's go ahead and do it. There's a couple different ways you can pick these. One way, you can just kind of grab the clusters, twist them, and just kind of rip them away from the substrate. Just be aware that if you do that, you may take a little substrate with you with your cluster. The way I like to do it is just use like a sharp fillet knife and kind of gently run it right at the base of the mushrooms, right at the surface of the block interface, and just kind of coax them away. So I'm going to do that now. Come off as one big cluster, and other times they'll kind of come individually depending on how they grew. So that looks pretty good there. Took a little bit of substrate, but not much. So basically two giant clusters that just fused together. All right, guys, thanks for watching. Hit me up in comments. Let me know what you think. We're going to call it a wrap on this video. A little teaser trailer for the finish. These blocks behind me are going to be my blocks for the next couple of videos. But we focused on oysters for this video because that's what a lot of new growers start off with. But the principles I showed you in terms of growing with the tubs and misting, that works for pretty much any mushroom. Definitely any of the gourmet species that are popularly grown. So it's a really versatile technique, very simple, obviously, but as a new grower, it gives you a good base of knowledge to build on as you grow and build a humidity chamber, fully automated fruiting chamber. Check out my new Patreon page. I just got that up there. I had some really cool benefits on there for just a few bucks a month. You can see my videos early with no ads, exclusive content. The higher tier got some really cool perks too. So check me out on Patreon. The link will be in the description of this video. Hit me up in comments. Let me know what you think, and we'll catch you next video.